At 2:12 p.m., the room felt routine. Slides, polite nods, controlled voices. "Transfer your knowledge and leave," the VP said, like it was already decided. She didn't argue, didn't react. Just opened her laptop and saved everything. 3 folders, 2 backups, 1 quiet pause. No one noticed the timestamp. No one asked what exactly she knew. No one realized what wasn't written anywhere. 5 minutes later, a report reached the CFO's screen. A number appeared where no one expected risk. $80 million. And suddenly, the room wasn't routine anymore. The meeting didn't collapse. It compressed, like air before a storm. Glass walls, muted city noise, a long table reflecting faces that preferred not to show uncertainty. On the screen, slide 14. Operational continuity. Bullet points, tidy, reassuring, false. She sat slightly to the side, not at the center anymore. That shift had happened weeks ago, quietly, without announcement. Titles stayed the same. Access didn't. "Let's keep this efficient," the VP said, tapping the table with a pen. Not aggressive, just final. A tone designed to skip discussion and land directly on execution. Eyes moved, some to her, some away. Everyone knew who the line was for. She nodded once. No resistance, no questions. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Most people would negotiate, clarify, stall. She didn't. Instead, she turned slightly, opened her laptop, and began working. Not fast, not slow. Precisely. Click. Folder structure, clean. Names that meant nothing to outsiders and everything to the system. No one leaned in. No one asked what exactly was being transferred. Because the assumption was simple. If it's in the documentation, it's controlled. If it's controlled, it's safe. That assumption had survived years. She selected 3 directories, paused, renamed 1 file, just 1, adding a version suffix no one else used. A small deviation, easy to ignore, critical to notice. Then, save. A soft system sound, barely audible under the hum of the room. "It will coordinate access," someone added from the far end, not looking up. Standard protocol, standard confidence. She didn't respond, because what they were asking for wasn't access, it was interpretation. Context, sequence, judgment calls made over years, never written, never formalized, never questioned. She closed one window, opened another, a local file. No cloud icon, no sync indicator. For a fraction of a second, her reflection appeared on the screen, calm, almost detached, like someone finishing a process, not losing a position. Across the table, a director cleared his throat. "Timeline?" he asked. "Today," the VP replied without hesitation. "We move fast." Of course they did. Speed feels like control, until it removes the only person who actually has it. She finally looked up. Not at the VP, not at the screen, at the table itself, as if mapping something invisible across it. Dependencies, hidden links, unwritten sequences that didn't exist in any workflow tool. Then she looked back down. Final save. This time, she didn't pause. She closed the laptop halfway, enough to signal completion, not departure. "Done," she said.
One word. No emphasis. No explanation. Relief moved through the room. Not visible, but measurable. Shoulders eased. Pens moved again. Someone even exhaled quietly. The system, they believed, had been handed over. What no one asked was simple. What exactly had just been handed off, and what hadn't? Because 5 minutes later, a different room, 3 floors up, would open a report that didn't match any of this calm, and the number at the top wouldn't be a projection. It would be exposure, $80 million risk. But for now, everything still looked controlled. 5 minutes is nothing, until it's exactly enough. On the 3rd floor,
The air felt different, less polished, more operational. No glass walls here, just screens, numbers, and people who didn't have time for narratives.
The CFO didn't look up when the alert came in. He rarely did. Flagged variants, someone said from across the room, already scrolling. Which model? Continuity projection. That made him pause, not because of the model itself, but because of who built it. He leaned forward. One click, then another. The dashboard opened cleanly. Too cleanly. No red, no blinking warnings. Just a quiet deviation in the corner. Small enough to ignore, large enough to matter. $80 million. Not loss. Not yet. Exposure. Explain, he said. No one answered immediately, because the numbers were correct. They just didn't make sense. A dependency node had gone soft, not broken, not missing, just undefined, like a bridge that still exists on paper, but no longer holds weight. Where's this coming from? Knowledge transfer gap, the analyst replied, slower this time. Process continuity risk. The CFO's eyes narrowed, not in panic, but in recognition. He'd seen this before, not often, but enough to know it wasn't a technical error. Who owns the logic? He asked. Silence. Not the kind that fills a room, the kind that removes answers from it. Back downstairs, the meeting was wrapping up with practiced efficiency. Access will be provisioned by end of day, IT confirmed. Documentation is complete, someone added, glancing briefly in her direction. Complete. A dangerous word when no one defines it. She sat still, hands resting lightly on the closed laptop. Not defensive, not engaged, just finished. Across the table, the VP gave a short nod, approval without warmth, a signal to move on. Good, let's proceed. Chairs shifted, laptops closed, the rhythm of resolution, until a phone vibrated, once, twice, then again, long enough to interrupt. The VP frowned slightly, checked the screen, and didn't speak. That was the first visible crack. Is something wrong? A director asked, half standing. No answer. The VP's expression didn't change dramatically. It tightened, subtle, controlled, but unmistakable. He looked up. Stay, he said. Not loud, not sharp, just different. The room froze, not because of the word, but because of the tone. Upstairs, the CFO was already on his feet. Pull the dependency chain, he said, grabbing a tablet. Now. It's incomplete, the analyst replied. We don't have full logic mapping. Then find who does. A pause, a realization, and then alignment. 3 floors apart, 2 rooms arrived at the same question, at the same time. Where is the knowledge? Back in the meeting room, all eyes slowly turned. Not to the VP, not to the screen, to her. She didn't move immediately, just looked at them, one by one, calm, unrushed, unreadable, like someone who already understood the question and the cost of asking it too late. And in that silence, one detail surfaced, quiet, precise, irreversible. Access had been transferred, files had been saved, processes had been documented, but meaning was never part of the handover. And now they were looking at the only person who still held it. If you've ever seen a decision made too fast, pause here, because what happens next isn't about access titles or systems. It's about who actually holds the leverage when everything looks complete. Subscribe and stay with the story. The next chapter shifts the balance, quietly and permanently. No one asked her to stay, but no one asked her to leave either. That was the second crack. The room had shifted from decision to dependency without anyone announcing it. You could feel it in the way people stopped packing their laptops, in the way chairs remained half-turned, in the way silence stretched just a second too long. The VP stood still, phone in hand, screen dimmed but not dismissed. Explain the exposure, he said finally. Not to the room, to her, a precise pivot, from authority to request. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened the laptop again, slowly, deliberately. The hinge stopped at the exact same angle as before. No more, no less. A controlled motion, like reopening a case that had already been closed. On the screen, no slides, no dashboards, just a plain interface, minimal, unimpressive. Your documentation is complete, the VP added, this time with a slight edge, a reminder, or an attempt at one. She nodded. It is, she said. And then, another pause. But it's not executable. That word landed differently. Across the table, someone frowned. Executable? Yes, she replied, calm. It describes what, not when, not why, and definitely not what to ignore. A subtle shift moved through the room, because everyone there understood systems, but very few understood exceptions. And systems fail on exceptions. She tapped once on the keyboard. A diagram appeared, not in color, not polished, just lines, nodes, arrows that didn't follow standard flow logic. This, she said, is what actually runs. The VP stepped closer. Not aggressively, just involuntarily. That's not in the repository, someone said quietly. No, she agreed. It can't be. Why not? Because some knowledge doesn't survive being flattened into procedure. But she didn't say that out loud. Instead, she zoomed in. A single node, small, easily overlooked, sat between two major process blocks. That's where your $80 million sits, she said. No drama, no emphasis, just location. Silence again, but sharper this time. Focused, directed. What is it? The VP asked. She looked at the node for a second longer than necessary. A decision, she said. Not a rule, not a system, not a file. A decision. When do you make it? Someone asked from the far end, voice tighter now. She leaned back slightly. You don't, she replied. Not anymore. That was the moment the room understood the structure of the problem. Not missing data. Not broken access. Lost judgment. The CFO's voice came through the speaker, clear, controlled, already aligned with the gravity of the number. I need continuity on that node, he said. Now. She didn't look at the device. Because the request wasn't technical. It was strategic. You had it, she said quietly. Until today. A direct line, no accusation, just timeline. The VP's jaw tightened, not visibly to everyone, but enough. We still have the assets, he said. We just need the sequence. Assets. Another precise word, another incomplete one. She closed the diagram halfway, not hiding it, just removing easy visibility. The sequence isn't fixed, she said. It adapts. To what? The VP asked. She looked up. For that answer, you need context. And context, unlike files, doesn't transfer on command. It builds, over time, through decisions that never get recorded. The room didn't move. Because suddenly, speed was no longer an advantage. It was a liability. 5 minutes ago, they were optimizing transition. Now, they were negotiating understanding. And that changes leverage completely. She placed her hands lightly on the edge of the laptop. Not defensive, not assertive, balanced, as if holding the exact point where the system still worked and choosing whether to keep it there. The CFO spoke again, this time without filters. What do you need? A clean question. Finally. She didn't answer immediately, because the answer would redefine roles that had just been resolved, and everyone in the room felt it. The structure had inverted. The person asked to transfer knowledge was now the only one who could restore it, and the cost of delay wasn't abstract anymore. It had a number, $80 million, and rising. The question hung in the room longer than it should have. What do you need? Clean, direct, late. She didn't rush to answer, because this wasn't a moment for speed.
It was a moment for precision. Outside, somewhere beyond the glass, the city kept its rhythm. Cars moved, lights changed. Inside, everything had slowed to decision time. She adjusted the laptop slightly, not to hide the diagram, but to center it. A subtle signal. We're discussing this properly now. Continuity, she said. One word.
The VP exhaled quietly, almost imperceptibly. As in? As in controlled transition, she replied. Not extraction. Another shift, because transfer your knowledge and leave suddenly sounded crude, incomplete, expensive. We already initiated the handover, someone from legal added, trying to stabilize the narrative. Documentation is in place. She nodded, not dismissing it. Documentation describes structure, she said. Continuity preserves behavior. No one interrupted. That distinction, simple on the surface, cut deeper than any escalation. The CFO's voice came again, now more measured. What's the window? She didn't hesitate this time. 3 weeks. The VP reacted first. That's not feasible. Of course it wasn't. It wasn't designed to be. She didn't argue, just looked at him, calm, analytical, almost neutral. You're not buying time, she said. You're buying stability. A few heads lowered, not in defeat, in calculation. Because now the variable wasn't cost. It was volatility. She turned the screen slightly toward them again. That node, she continued, pointing lightly, responds to signals that aren't in any system. Vendor behavior, timing shifts, exceptions that look like noise, until they're not. The director from earlier leaned forward. And without it? She met his glad. You don't fail immediately, she said. You drift. A more dangerous outcome. No alarms, no crash, just slow deviation, until the number on the report becomes real. $80 million risk. And then more. Silence returned. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was alignment forming. The VP straightened slightly. What exactly are you proposing? Finally. Structure. She closed the laptop, not fully, just enough to shift focus back to the room. Phase transition, she said. Access stays where it is. Decisions stay with me, temporarily. Parallel observation for your team. Then gradual release. Controlled, measurable, reversible, until it isn't. And after, the CFO asked. After, she replied, you don't need me. That line landed differently. Not emotional, not defensive. Final. Because it implied something critical. She wasn't negotiating dependency. She was designing its end. The VP looked at her longer this time, evaluating not position, but leverage. Terms? He asked. There it was. Not whether, not why. How? She folded her hands lightly. Clarity, she said. Defined scope, protected execution, and alignment on outcomes. No numbers yet, not because they didn't matter, but because structure comes before price. Legal shifted slightly in their seats. This was their terrain again, but on her terms. The CFO didn't interrupt, because he already understood something the room was just beginning to process. This wasn't recovery anymore. It was redesign, under pressure. And the person leading it was the one they had just asked to leave. The VP glanced briefly at his phone again, then put it face down on the table. A small act, a meaningful one. Draft it, he said. 2 words. Decision made, but not resolved. Because agreements written under pressure carry something extra. They remember why they were signed. And somewhere inside that $80 million exposure, one fact had become unavoidable. They didn't lose control in a system. They lost it in a moment. And now they were paying to rebuild it correctly this time. But rebuilding takes time, and time was still moving. The room didn't celebrate the decision. It stabilized. Laptops reopened, not for presentations, for terms. Legal moved first, as they always do when uncertainty needs structure. "Let's define scope," one of them said, already drafting. She didn't lean in. She didn't need to, because the core was already set. "Continuity period, 3 weeks," Legal read aloud, typing. "Decision authority. Temporary retention." The VP didn't interrupt this time. He watched. Not the document. Her. Because something had shifted beyond the text. Control had become conditional. "Access remains unchanged," Legal continued. "Parallel observation by assigned team..." "Not observation," she said calmly. A pause. "Shadowing." The correction was small, technically minor, strategically precise. Observation is passive. Shadowing learns. Legal nodded, adjusting the wording. "Shadowing," they repeated. The CFO's voice came through again, steady, grounded in numbers. "What's the exit condition?" A sharper question. Not when does it end? When is it safe to end? She didn't answer immediately, because this was the real threshold, not time, capability. She turned the laptop fully toward them again. The diagram reappeared. Same nodes, same quiet complexity. "This," she said, pointing to the same small node, "stops being a risk when someone else can run it, without me correcting them. No theatrics, just a measurable standard." "And if they can't?" the VP asked. She met as glad, direct, unflinching. "Then it's not ready." Silence. Not uncomfortable. Accurate. Legal typed slower now. Every word mattered, because they weren't writing protection. They were writing dependency, with an end date. "Compensation structure?" someone asked carefully. There it was, the number layer. She didn't rush. "Aligned with risk exposure," she said, "and tied to transition milestones." Again, structure before Tsifri. The CFO responded immediately. Approved. No negotiation. Because he wasn't buying her time. He was buying down risk. $80 million doesn't argue. It reallocates. The VP exhaled, this time visible. Not relief, acceptance. The narrative had flipped completely. This was no longer about replacing her. It was about replicating what only she could do. And replication is slower than removal. Legal turned the screen slightly. "Review," they said. She stepped closer now. Not as an employee, not as someone leaving, as someone validating a system that had to hold without her. Her eyes moved line by line, not reading, checking for failure points, ambiguity, gaps, assumptions hiding in clean language. She stopped once. "Add escalation boundary," she said. "Decisions outside defined context revert to me, until closure." Legal added it without debate, because by now they understood. The cost of missing a line here wouldn't be theoretical. It would be reported. She finished reviewing, closed the laptop. This time, completely, a different kind of closure. "Send it," she said. No emphasis, no ownership, just completion. The VP nodded once. The CFO disconnected. Legal finalized. And for the first time since the meeting began, the room had something real. Not control, not certainty. A path. Structured. Conditional. Earned. She picked up her bag, but didn't move toward the door immediately. Not yet. Because the system wasn't running again. It was restarting. And restarts are fragile. She looked once more at the table, at the people, the screens, the document now circulating across inboxes. Everything looked familiar, almost unchanged. That was the illusion. Because one thing had fundamentally shifted. They would move forward, but not without understanding what had nearly been lost. An understanding, once forced, doesn't fade easily. She finally turned, walked to the door, paused just for a fraction of a second. Not for effect, for confirmation, then left. Quietly. No announcement, no reaction, just absence. And in that absence, the system began to reveal something new. Not dependency, awareness of what knowledge actually costs, of what speed can break, of what silence can protect. Because 5 minutes had been enough to expose the risk. 3 weeks would be enough to rebuild the logic. But the lesson, that would stay much longer. Silence.